How's it going, guys? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000. I hope you guys are having a great day. As today, we're going to take a look at two snowstorms that are expected to impact the Northeast. But first, let's take a look at the snowstorm that could happen in the more long-term future, where by next week, by the early time on the weekend, we could see another more impactful snowstorm impact the Northeast coast and bring potentially close to a foot of snow based on latest run of the European model. If we were to take a look at that, we see, look at the early Saturday to late Friday time frame. We see plenty of snowfall right up along the Interstate 95 corridor. And not only that, look at the pressure of this storm system at 968 millibars. So it is not only producing a heavy amount of snowfall, but it's also going to bring strong winds. Of course, coastal flooding should be expected with a storm system this strong, which could easily lead to power outages, especially if you're right up along the coast. As to put it into perspective, how powerful this storm will be, a 968 millibar storm system would be equivalent to nearly a Category 2 or Category 3 hurricane. I'm not saying you're going to see Category 2 or Category 3 type sustained winds, but at least the sheer strength of this storm system is almost equivalent to what you'd see in a pretty powerful hurricane, and the wind field will be much larger than what you see in a hurricane, just not as concentrated for the wind speed to be necessarily as high, but certainly high enough for to cause some havoc right up along the coast and bring power outages and coastal flooding. But look at this, very heavy snowfall right over Boston, Hartford, Connecticut, into Rhode Island. Providence is getting impacted pretty hard with very heavy snow bands, so as New York City. And going a little bit further backwards, we could see a decent amount of mixing with this storm system as well, and a freezing rain threat before it eventually all changes into snow. And as you know, or as you probably know, like, freezing rain is definitely something you might not want to play around with, because freezing rain could be as I'll say a quarter of an inch of ice on the roads could be just as impactful as 10 inches of snowfall, as you definitely don't want to underestimate freezing rain. It could cause just very dangerous road conditions in general, and we see that there's that possibility. And we're gonna have to see if how the temperature will be between the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, because what causes freezing rain is that we need enough of a warm air intrusion in the mid levels for this to occur. We're gonna need to see if that'll be the case, but there's certainly something to keep in mind over the next few days, because this could potentially be our biggest snowstorm we've seen in over 3 years, even bigger than the last one we've just seen in the Northeast, because look at just how powerful it is. But there's still uncertainty with the forecast. Look at the forecast hour I'm going at is around 180 hours out, so approximately 7 days out between now and Saturday, which means that we're definitely going to need to see if there's going to be any significant changes with the computer models, as the key thing, of course, will be the amount of ridging that's just the east of this storm system. Because if the ridging ends up being a little bit stronger than anticipated, then we should not only see most likely a weaker storm system, at least early on for the Northeast, but it'll also force the storm a little bit further westward, to a point where the snowfall will mainly be relegated to the more western portions of the Northeast and more interior portions of the Northeast, and potentially portions of the Great Lakes region. Maybe Ohio could get involved if we were to see a trajectory shift a little bit further westward with a stronger ridge, which is still in the realm of possibilities. Because if we were to take a look at the GFS model on the flip side of when it comes to this snowstorm. So let me go to the 18Z run that gives the most reliable, or at least the most recent computer model run. So taking a look at that at the same time period, we see that most of the areas receiving snowfall in the European model scenario are experiencing entirely a rain event in this scenario. And a big reason why is because the GFS model expects the ridging just to the east of this storm system to be just strong enough to steer it a little bit further northward, enhance the southerly wind speed a little bit more, to the point where more warm air intrudes the southeast eastern portions of the Northeast in that scenario where we clearly see it's entirely a rain event with the exceptions of the interior northeast, and it doesn't strengthen very rapidly until a little bit later once it approaches Canada. And the reason being is that since this ridge is going to be over this area, or at least somewhat of a stronger ridge, that'll sort of stabilize the jet stream at least early on, to the point where there won't be a ton of instability. This trough you see right here won't dip as far south thanks to this ridge stabilizing the jet stream, which means that there's going to be less instability, less intensification, at least early on. So we do see a weaker storm in this scenario, at least much weaker than what the European model is currently suggesting. So we're definitely going to need to pay close attention to that. Let me show you guys a 500 millibar height anomaly to give you guys a good idea of what will determine what factor will determine if we're going to see a major northeast snowstorm or not. So here's how it's going to look like over the next few days. Of course, we have this current snowstorm moving through the northeast, which I'll get to just in a second. It'll move to the east, and eventually we're going to see a decent amount of ridging build right over the northeast. So temperatures should remain around average. We should see some troughing right over the southeast, so watch out for heavy rain over there. But then we're going to see a storm system come off the Pacific coast and eventually move through the United States. There's going to be quite a bit of ridging, but this low pressure system will still have a decent amount of cold air to be able to maintain itself, to be able to maintain its strength, even after it moves eastward and even after it disconnects from the jet stream that's well to the north of it. But eventually it should reconnect with the jet stream, because there's expected to be a small trough that's going to dip down from Canada into the northeast, which should enhance the instability and allow the storm to intensify. But we clearly see that there's still a small amount of ridging over the northeast, and that would be enough to steer this storm just a little bit too far to the north, and steer this low as well a little bit too far to the north for the cold air to be able to move as far south, which is why we see primarily a rain event right up along the coast in the GFS model scenario. But the European model, it's a different story. That ridge isn't located there, so we see the storm system take more of a due easterly direction rather than take a move towards the northeast, which that certainly allows the cool air to be able to move further southward. We clearly see it right here. Here's a trough, and then here's this here's the other trough that's expected to bring that cold air further southward. And we see that the European model in this scenario expects a weaker amount of ridging. But this trough that was located in the southeast becomes stronger, and that manipulates the wind speed to the point where this trough would rather take an easterly direction rather than get forced up north by this weak, or I wouldn't say a weaker ridge, but this ridge isn't as dominant over the northeast at the same time period as what the GFS model is currently suggesting. So we see the storm take primarily easterly direction, and we see a more significant jet stream dip thanks to the fact that this ridge just so west of this storm system is a little bit stronger, and that certainly brings a very impactful winter storm right up along the northeast coast. So there's still a lot of time to iron out the forecast, but if this were to come for fruition, you should expect a ton of snowfall, especially right up along the coast, at least in the European model scenario. So this is the amount of snowfall you should expect over with the first snowstorm, anywhere between 3 to 6, so 1 to 3 inches of snowfall, maybe localized areas a little bit more than 6 inches, more specifically over West Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. But I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But moving on to the second potential major snowstorm, we see that this could easily bring 6 to 12 inches of snow right up along the coast, and it's including the big cities like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York City, Hartford, Connecticut, Bridgeport, Connecticut, all the areas along the coast of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and even Massachusetts, going into Boston as well. And this extends into northern New England as well, where Maine and New Hampshire will get involved in a pretty significant snowstorm like this. And I wouldn't even be surprised if we see the snow totals increase from what we're seeing right now if the European model detects that there's a little bit more cold air than anticipated with this storm system, because like I showed you guys, this storm system is going to be very powerful. So if there's just enough cold air, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if we could be talking about feet of snow rather than inches of snow in the Northeast. So we're definitely going to need to pay close attention to this, the exact trajectory of this storm system. However, I will say that more likely than not, we're likely going to see some sort of nor'easter in the Northeast, but the question remains how powerful it'll be and where exactly that snow will fall, because there's certainly still that possibility the snow will mainly impact the interior Northeast and maybe as far in the states as far west as Ohio. So definitely we're going to need to pay very close attention to that. Now let's talk about the current snowstorm that's impacting the Northeast, and that's expected to impact the coastal Northeast very, very soon as you take a look at the current radar. So this, as of 10:30, we do have a decent amount of snow bands developing right over West Virginia and southern Pennsylvania, where those are the areas expected to receive the most snowfall from this storm system, or at least the most likely to receive the highest snow total from this storm system, as it's going to be sort of in a convergent boundary where it's going to be in that area where the heaviest snow bands will outlie, and this could move further eastward into Philadelphia and western New Jersey as well. But this should definitely this is something to keep in mind for your Friday evening or Saturday morning commute, because this will bring a decent amount of snowfall. It might not necessarily be as strong as the last snowstorm, but you could easily still see 3 to 6 inches of snowfall, and if you're not prepared for that, that could be significant. So if we were to take a look at the current radar, the snowfall is now approaching New Jersey, and it's right at New York City's and Philadelphia's doorstep, and it's soon going to approach Washington, D.C. as well. And eventually we're going to see the snowfall move into New England, and this storm intensified just a little bit, not a ton, but still enough to bring a decent amount of snowfall over the area. So here's a current forecast from the GFS model. So right around the overnight hours on Saturday or into the very early morning hours on Saturday, that's when you should expect the worst of the snowfall right over Philadelphia, New Jersey, the Delaware Peninsula. And the GFS model, interestingly, is bringing very heavy snow bands right over Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, as I know in those cities it's been quite quiet when it comes to snowfall over the past few winters, but now this is your opportunity to finally receive a good amount of snowfall right over those cities. So definitely enjoy it, because I know it's been rough for you guys when it comes to snowfall. And same goes for the Delaware Peninsula. You will see possibly the most snowfall from this storm system. Southern New Jersey as well. New York City could receive, I'll say, around 3 to 6 inches of snowfall. And moving into southern New England, the snowfall likely won't be as heavy, since the heaviest snowfall will be just south of Boston most likely. But southern New England still could see maybe around 1 to 3 inches of snowfall. Northern New Jersey, you could see 3 to 6 inches as well. So definitely be prepared for that for your evening commute in a lot of these areas. And the European model is showing a fairly similar forecast as well, where we see that the forecast is, of course, very certain at this point. This storm system is less than 24 hours out from impacting the Northeast cities, so it's unlikely we're going to see any significant changes. So you definitely need to be prepared for your Saturday morning commute in a lot of these areas, as you will see quite a bit of snowfall right over some of the bigger cities of the Northeast. In terms of the exact amount of snowfall you should receive, this is a forecast snowfall map from Fox Weather. I do believe you will see a little bit more snowfall in some of these areas like New Jersey. I expect the area of 3 to 5 to be a little bit bigger based on some of the more recent developments with the computer models leading a little bit more to more snow right over New Jersey and New York City. So expect more like 3 to 5 or to 2 to 4 inches of snowfall right over New York City, northern New Jersey. Same goes for southern New Jersey as well. Philadelphia should see a similar amount, and the heaviest snowfall should be right in the higher elevations of West Virginia and southwestern Pennsylvania, where you could see 5 to 8 inches of snowfall. This will impact areas like Scranton as well, and southern New England might receive an inch of snowfall. I think this map underestimated this snowfall just a little bit in southern New England. I think you might be able to receive an inch or a little bit less than that, or at least a trace of snowfall. So be aware of that in southern New England as well. But that's it for now, guys, and I thank you guys for watching, and make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content, and like this video if you do enjoy it.